All right, I'm going to start with the front of the vehicle. We'll start with my clearance lights. They're proper in color, which is amber. They're clear, they're clean, and they work properly. We'll come down to my windshield. My windshield has no obstructions. It's clean. There are no illegal stickers, no cracks, nothing blocking my view. I'm going to come down to my wipers. My wiper arms, they have proper tension on them. The wiper arms themselves are secure. I'm not missing my wiper blades. My wiper blades have no torn rubber, and they are secure. I'm going to come down to my hood mirrors. My hood mirrors, they're mounted securely. There's no cracks, no damage, nothing obstructing my view from my mirrors. And when I'm in the truck, I would set those mirrors for me, so they'll be adjusted for me. Now I'm going to come down to the underneath my truck. Underneath my truck, I have no puddles indicating there's a leak. I have no fluids dripping that would indicate a leak. And now I'm going to go under the hood. On this side of the truck, the first thing I see when I open the hood is the alternator. My alternator, it's mounted securely, no missing nuts or bolts on it. The wires going to my alternator, there's no frays and the wires are mounted securely to the alternator. My alternator is belt driven. My belt is secure, it has no frays, no tires, it has no more than 3/4 inch play in it, indicating it to be loose. Underneath here I have my water pump. My water pump is mounted securely, no missing nuts or bolts on it. The hose going to it, the rubber hose going to my water pump, it has no frays, bulges, or damage, and it's not leaking. Also right here on this side I have my frame. There's no illegal welds, there's no holes drilled in it, no cracks, no damage on it. All my coolant hoses on this side, no damage with them, no frays, no bulges, no leaks with them. My side engine block, it's not cracked, it's not damaged, no leaks on it. Now on this side of the truck, I'm just going to kind of start from the top and work my way down. My coolant level, it's filled to the appropriate level. The hose is going to and from a reservoir tank. They're not leaking, no cuts or frays or bulges in them. My windshield washer fluid, it is filled to the appropriate level. My coolant level is filled to the appropriate level, which I've already said. My oil dipstick, I would pull the dipstick out, make sure it's above the add mark and in the appropriate operating range. My power steering fluid, I could check it through the sight glass, or I could pull the dipstick if it did not have a sight glass. Make sure it was filled to the appropriate level. My air compressor. This air compressor is gear driven. The hose is going to and from the air compressor, the oil hose and the air hose. They're not leaking, no bulges, no frays in any of the hoses. They are securely mounted. And now I'm going to start with my steering linkage. My steering shaft, it's mounted securely. The U-joints are not worn, and no bends on my steering shaft. My steering shaft is going to my steering gearbox. My steering gearbox, not missing any nuts or bolts, securely mounted, not leaking. The hose coming from my steering gearbox to my power steering reservoir, not leaking. Now I'd like to do my steering linkage. My pitman arm, drag link, tie rod, all mounted securely, not worn, no worn sockets. The castle nuts and cotter pins are intact, nothing loose on them. Now I'm going to move to my front suspension. My spring hangers, mounted securely, they're not broken. I'm not missing any leaves, no cracks in my leaf springs. Holding these leaf springs are my spring hangers and shackles and mounts. They're not broken, they're not missing any nuts or bolts. Holding these springs together are my U-bolts. I'm not missing any nuts or bolts on them. There's nothing on them indicating there's damage. I have a shock absorber. Have an upper and lower mount on my shock absorber. It's not missing any bolts or nuts on it. My shock absorber is not bent and it's not leaking. Now I'm going to move on to my brake system. My brake system, I have a brake chamber. It's mounted securely, not missing any nuts or bolts. Going to this brake chamber, I have an air hose. My air hose is not leaking. It's mounted securely, no frays or damage on it. I have a slack adjuster and a push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod, the pin is in place. The Carter key is in place. My slack adjuster, it will not move more, have no more than 1 inch travel when the brakes are applied. My push rod, my slack adjuster will have no more than 1 inch play when my brakes are released. My push rod will have no less than 90 degrees when my brakes are applied. Now I'm going to move on to my drums and linings. This is a drum brake truck, so my drums and lining. My drums have no cracks, no damage. My brake linings, not worn dangerously thin. I have no oil or grease indicating a leak, all mounted securely. And now I'm going to move on to my tires, steer tires. I'm going to do my TOP. I'm going to start with my tread. It's at least 4/32 tread because it is a steer tire. It is evenly worn. Now I'm going to do my O, which is my overall, my inside and outside sidewalls. No cuts, no bulges, no damage on them. Now I'm going to do my P, which is my valve stem cap, mounted securely, not missing. I will check the air pressure with a tire gauge to the manufacturer's specifications. My rims, they're not bent, they're not broken, they're not cracked, they have no illegal welds. Holding these rims on are my lug nuts. My lug nuts are mounted securely. I have no shiny threads indicating they're loose. I have a hub oil seal. I have no missing bolts on it, nothing, no leaks from it, and I will check it to make sure it's filled to the appropriate level. All right, driver's side door. I'm going to start with my driver's side door. My side mirror, it's not cracked, it's not damaged, it's mounted securely. I have no illegal stickers on it. My side window, it's clear, it's functioning properly. I'm going to go ahead and go to my door latch. It opens and closes correctly. My door hinge is secure. I have a rubber seal around my door. It's not cut, frayed, or damaged in any way. While I'm right here, my grab handle's secure. I'm going to go ahead and do my emergency equipment. I have a BC10 fire extinguisher filled to the appropriate level. I have 3 emergency triangles, and I have extra fuses and breakers in the truck. Right now I'm going to move on to the next section. Now I'm going to talk about my steps. My steps are mounted secure, not missing any nuts or bolts. My fuel tank's secure. My straps are in place. They're not missing any nuts or bolts. The rubbers in my strap, they're not worn or cut. That would rub and cause a leak. My fuel tank is not leaking. I would look underneath to make sure the fuel lines are not leaking. I have a fuel cap. It's secure. It has a safety chain on it. I would make sure the safety chain was in place. There's a rubber seal under this fuel cap. I would make sure that it was in place so it would not leak. All right, I would check this side door just like I checked this door. I would make sure the rubber seal's in place and intact. I would make sure the hinge was okay and it opened and closed properly and sealed when it was closed. This light right here is a left turn signal on this side. It'll be a right turn signal on the other side. It's a 4-way flasher. It could possibly be a clearance light also. Now I'm going to move to the back of the tractor. The back of the tractor, the steps going to my catwalk are securely mounted. I'm not missing any nuts or bolts. My catwalk itself, it has no obstructions. It's securely mounted, not cracked or broken. While I'm right here, I'm going to go ahead and check my exhaust system. My exhaust system, it has no soot indicating there's a leak. It's mounted securely. It's not missing any nuts or bolts on this. Now I'm going to move down to my drive shaft. My drive shaft, I would check to make sure the U-joints are in place. I would make sure there's nothing wrapped around my drive shaft. I would make sure that it is securely mounted. And I'm going to continue on from the inside of the truck out. All right, so I'm going to start with my suspension. My suspension, I have leaf springs here. My leaf springs are not bent, broken, cracked, or damaged. My leaf springs have spring mounts and hangers. They're not missing any nuts or bolts. They're securely mounted. Holding these leaf springs together is my U-bolts. My U-bolts, all my bolts are in place. My U-bolts themselves are not bent, broken, or cracked. This truck has a torsion bar on it, or you could call it a torque arm. Either one, it's securely mounted, not missing any nuts or bolts. My shock absorber, it's mounted securely. It's not bent, and it is not leaking. My airbag itself, my mounts on my airbag are mounted securely. It's secure. The airbag itself is secure, and it's not leaking. Okay, now I'm going to start with my brakes. My brakes. My brake chamber, it is mounted secure, not leaking. Going to this brake chamber is a brake hose. It's not frayed or damaged, not leaking. I have my brake chamber, my hose, now my slack adjuster, and my push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod, my pin's in place. I'm not missing a Carter key. My slack adjuster has no more than 1 inch play when the brakes are released. My push rod has is no less than 90 degrees when the brakes are applied. This truck has drum brakes on it. My drums and linings, my drum, it's not cracked, it's not bent, no excessive wear on it. My linings, they're not cracked or damaged, no grease on them. They're not worn dangerously thin. Okay, now as I work my way out, I'm going to talk about my splash guard. Since it's going forward, it does not have to have DOT reflective tape, but it is securely mounted, not missing any nuts or bolts. Alright, now I'm going to move on to my tire. I'm going to do my TOP. I'm going to start with my tread. Since this is a drive tire, it's at least 2 30-second tread, evenly worn. Then I'm going to do my O, which is overall, inner and outer of my sidewall. No cuts, no bulges, no damage indicating they're a problem. Now I'm going to do the P, which would be my pressure. My valve stem and valve cap, they're not missing, they're not bent, they're not broken. I would check my tire pressure with a tire gauge to make sure it meets the manufacturer's specifications. All right, these are bud wheels. So I check my bud spacings, make sure that they're budded together correctly, make sure that there is nothing in the tires that would indicate there's a problem, and they're evenly separated. All right, my rims, they're not bent, they're not broke, they're not cracked, no illegal welds on them. Holding these rims are my lug nuts. My lug nuts, I'm not missing any, they're securely mounted. I have no shiny threads that would indicate looseness. I have a hub axle seal. My hub axle seal, I'm not missing any bolts on it, it's not leaking, and it's securely mounted. And I would do this set of brakes and tires and suspension the same as this. And while I'm right here, I'm going to go ahead and do my emergency, service, and electrical lines. They're not dragging on the catwalk, they're not cut, they're not damaged, there's no frays on them. And I have glad hands on my tractor and my trailer. I would make sure my glad hands on my tractor and trailer, I'd make sure that they were mounted correctly. I would check the rubber O-rings in them to make sure that they were in place and it seals with no air leaks. I would check my electrical connection, make sure it's plugged in and working properly. Okay, I'm going to continue on with the tractor itself. I'm going to move around to the back. I have a mud flap. My mud flap is securely mounted, not missing any nuts or bolts. I have DOT reflective tape on it. Alright, then on the back of the tractor I have lights. I have a left turn signal, I have a right turn signal. I have 4-way flashers. I have clearance lights, I have backup lights, I have brake lights, all clean. They are the proper color, which is red, and they are working properly. All right, now I'm going to move on to my fifth wheel. My fifth wheel. My kingpin and apron, they're not bent, they're not broken, they're not damaged. I have no gap between my apron and my fifth wheel. I will check this kingpin to make sure my locking jaws are securely wrapped around the shank of the kingpin. I would make sure there's no missing hardware on my locking jaws. Kingpin, apron, and gap. I'd make sure there's no gap. I've said I'd make sure that my release arm is in the engaged position. I would make sure my safety latch is holding my release arm in. This is a sliding fifth wheel. I would make sure that my pins are in place, holding my sliding fifth wheel, and that I had the proper gap from the rear of the tractor to the landing gear. I'd make sure there's proper clearance on that. Okay, my platform and mounting bolts, all secure, not missing any nuts or bolts, all mounted properly. Mounting gear, sliding pins. My fifth wheel is mounted securely. It's greased appropriately. All right, now we're going to start with the front of the trailer. My header board. I'm not missing any rivets. I don't have any holes in my header board. No damage to the front of my trailer. The front of my trailer has clearance lights. They're the proper color, which is amber. They're clean and they're working properly. All right, now I'm going to move to the side of my trailer. I have DOT reflective tape down the side of my trailer. The side of my trailer has no holes in the side of the trailer. My frame or my rail itself, it's not bent, it's not broken, it's not cracked. I have cross members underneath this frame. The cross members, they're all in place, they're intact. Also on my tractor itself, I have cross members on my tractor. I would make sure that they are not bent or broken or damaged. These cross members go to the frame, which we've already said is not bent, it's not cracked, no holes in it. All right, now I'm going to move on down. We've talked about the DOT reflective tape. I have a clearance light up here, which is amber in color, which is the proper color. It's working properly. Now I'm going to move down to my landing gear. My landing gear itself, it's not missing any nuts or bolts. My feet on my landing gear are raised to the appropriate level. The feet themselves, not missing any nuts or bolts, mounted securely. My crank handle is hanging in the hanger. It's securely mounted, not missing any nuts or bolts. I'm going to keep moving down. When I get down here, this light right here, it's a left turn signal on this side, a right turn signal on the other side. It's a four-way flasher and it's a clearance light. And so I can finish with my clearance lights. Also, on the back of the trailer right here would be a clearance light. It would be red in color since it's toward the back. That's a clearance light. It's the proper color and it's clean and working properly. Now I'm going to do my sliding tandems. I'd make sure my release arm is in place and securely mounted. I would make sure my pins are all out, indicating they are working properly, making sure I'm not missing any hardware, nuts or bolts on it. Now I'm going to move back up here to the brakes and suspension on my trailer. I'm going to start with my suspension. This is a spring ride trailer, so that means it does not have an airbag. This trailer does not have shocks, but if it did, I would check my airbag and my shocks to make sure they was mounted securely and they were not leaking. All right, now I'm going to move on with this trailer, which is a spring ride trailer. My springs, I'm not missing any springs. They're not bent, they're not cracked, they're not broken, they're not shifted. Holding these springs together is my U-bolts. My U-bolts are not cracked or broken, not missing any bolts on them. I have spring hangers and spring mounts. They're all mounted securely, not missing any nuts and bolts on them. I have a torque arm. My torque arm, it's mounted securely, not missing any nuts and bolts on them. Like I said, this truck doesn't have airbag or shock absorber. Now I'm going to move on to my brakes. I have a brake chamber. My brake chamber, it's mounted securely. not missing any nuts or bolts. Going to this brake chamber is a brake hose. My brake hose, it's not damaged, it's not frayed or cut. Right from that, I've got my slack adjuster and my push rod. They're not missing any pins or Carter keys. All the Carter keys, all the hardware is intact. My slack adjuster should have no more than 1 inch play when the brakes are released. My push rod should be no less than 90 degrees when the brakes are applied. This truck has drum brakes on, this trailer has drum brakes on it. My brake drums and linings, my brake drums are not cracked or damaged. There's no grease inside the brake drums. My brake linings are not worn dangerously thin. They're not cracked, no damage on them. All right, now I'm going to move on to my tires. TOP. Since this is a trailer tire, it has to be at least 2/32 tread and evenly worn. My O is my overall, inner and outer, inner and outer. No cuts, no bulges, no damage to the sidewall of the tires. My P, my valve stem and cap. Valve stem is not bent, broken, or damaged. My valve stem cap is in place and it's not damaged. These are Bud wheels also. Wheels are evenly spaced. There's no debris in between the duals, indicating a problem, and the wheels are butted together just like they're supposed to be. Now I'm going to move on to my rims. My rims, they're not bent, they're not broken, they're not cracked, there are no illegal welds on them. Holding these rims on are my lug nuts. I'm not missing any lug nuts. They're all tight. I have no shiny threads indicating they may be loose. I have a hub oil seal. My hub oil seal, all the bolts are in place and it's not leaking. Nothing to indicate there's a problem there. I would do this axle the same as I've done this axle. All right, I'm going to move on. Here I have a mud flap. My mud flap, would not have any DOT reflective tape because it's on the bumper itself, but it's mounted securely, not missing any nuts or bolts on it. This is a swing door trailer, so I have a door tie. I have a door tie right here. It's mounted securely, not missing any rivets or bolts on it. Right here is my ABS light. I would make sure it's the proper color, which is amber, and it's mounted securely and working properly. We've already done this clearance light, so now I'm going to move to the back of the trailer. Now we're going to start with the rear of the trailer. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. The rear of the trailer, I have clearance lights. Since they're on the back of the trailer, they're the proper color, which are red. They're clean and working properly. After my clearance lights, I'm going to come down to my doors. My doors are mounted securely. My hinges are not missing any nuts or bolts. The rubber around the door is secured. My door handles, they're latched securely. No missing hardware on them. All right, now I'm going to move on down to my lights. I have a left turn signal and a right turn signal. I have four-way flashers. I have tail lights and brake lights. We've already done our clearance lights. I have a tag light. All of these are the proper color, clean, and working properly. I have a tag itself. It's mounted secure. I have a DOT bumper. My DOT bumper is the proper height. That has the proper amount of DOT reflective tape on it. I would do the right side of my trailer and truck the same as I did my left side. All right, first thing I would do, I would get my safety belt. I'd take my safety belt and I would put it on to make sure it latches properly. I would make sure that there's no cuts, no damage, no frays in my safety belt. Then I would perform my safe start. I'd make sure the truck is in neutral. I'd make sure my parking brake and trailer brake are both applied. I would mash my clutch in. I would turn the key to the on position, let the gauges cycle. Then I would start the engine. I would release the clutch slowly, and then I'd continue on with my in-cab inspection. I would start from out here and work my way in. My mirrors mounted securely. They're adjusted for me. I have no stickers, legal stickers on them, no cracks. I'd come to my windshield. My windshield, it's clean, it's clear of debris, no illegal stickers or cracks on them. I'm going to come down to my wipers again. My wipers themselves, mounted securely, proper tension. My wiper blades, they're secure, they're not missing, they have no cuts or wire or frays on them. I would make sure that my wipers work, and I would make sure that my windshield washers work. Then I would put my hands right here and start and continue on with my end cap. While I got my hands right here, I get these wipers to quit working. While I got my hands right here, my hands right here on the horn, so that reminds me. I would check my city horn and my air horn. They're both working properly. Then I continue on around here with my hands while I'm right here. I'm going to check my indicators on my dash, my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my high beam light indicator, all working properly. Alright, now I'm going to continue on here, and I'm just going to use this dash just like a map. My coolant temperature is rising to the appropriate temperature. My oil pressure gauge is rising to the proper pressure. My voltmeter is showing that the alternator is charging. My air pressure gauge is rising to the appropriate proper PSI, which is between 120 and 125 PSI. I'm going to continue on over here. My defroster and my heater are both working properly. Now, I'm going to continue on and do my park brake test. First thing I'm going to check is my trailer brake. So I'm going to push the park brake in. I'm going to put the truck itself in first gear. Take my foot off the brake. Put slight pressure on the trailer brake to make sure it holds. And it holds. Put my foot back on the brake. I'm going to apply the park brake on the tractor. Release the trailer brake. I'm going to take my foot off the brake pedal. Supply a little pressure to the park brake on the tractor. It holds. Now I'm going to put my foot back on the brake pedal. Now I'm going to check my service brake. So I have my trailer brake and my park brake. Both are released. I have my foot on the brake pedal. I'm going to ease up on the clutch to put pressure on my service brake. My service brake holds. I could roll 5 miles per hour and apply the brakes to make sure the truck doesn't roll to the left or the right. So now I'm going to perform my lab. I'm going to leave the truck in first gear. I'm going to leave my trailer brake pushed in. I'm going to leave my parking brake pushed in. I'm going to cut the truck off. I'm going to take my foot off the clutch and the brake. I'm going to turn the ignition switch back to the on position. Now I'm going to perform my lab. So at first I will do the L part of my lab, which is the leak. I'd put my foot on the brake, supply light pressure. In a combination vehicle, I shouldn't lose any more than 4 pounds of air in 60 seconds. Now I'm going to continue on with the A part of my lab, the alarm. I'm going to fan the brakes down. At 60 PSI, I should get a visual or audible alarm or both. I have both. At 60 pounds, I have a visual and an audible. Now I'm going to continue fanning the brakes between 20 and 40, 20 and 45. My buttons should pop out. One or both of them should pop out. And there they are, they popped out. And that would complete my pre-trip.